No support. Okay, if anybody got 7 right, you can type in 7. If anybody got 9, you can type in 9. And I'd be surprised, but delighted if any of you got all of them right. I certainly didn't the first time through. That one on the colors tripped me up. All right. And feel free to email us after this and let us know if you liked that format for a meeting warm-up, a meeting starter. The we'd love. Okay, Joyce Sinnott, 5. Judith Lewison, 7. Very good, very good. All right, so if we are ready, and I see we do have our panelists there ready to go. So good morning, Sedona women. I'm hoping I can start a little early. I'm a couple of minutes early, but I'm hoping that's okay. So good morning, Sedona women. Today we have an educational and humorous presentation and mindful discussion about gender identity. This is a wonderful opportunity for us to listen, learn, and participate as JJ and Joey openly share their experience with us and invite our questions. So at any time during their presentations, you can type a question into the Q&A box. We won't be using the chat box for that today, just the Q&A box. So I believe JJ will go first and then Joey will follow, and they'll each speak for roughly half an hour. So JJ and Joey, we're delighted to have you here today.
Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. And I just want to read your bios before we start, and then I'll hand it over to you, JJ. JJ O'Brien is the non-binary person who lives life as both a man and a woman. JJ could also be identified as transgender, bigender, and gender fluid. JJ has lived in Sedona nearly 35 years and was the City of Sedona's Community Development Director, working for the city for 24 years before retiring in 2012. JJ is the president of the PFLAG Sedona Verde Valley, a nonprofit organization that provides support, education, and advocacy on behalf of the LGBTQ community, their parents, families, friends, and allies. JJ also volunteers at Sedona Red Rock High School as their football and basketball announcer. JJ O'Brien will be telling their personal story and also providing education regarding transgender related issues. Thanks for being here today, JJ.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And Joey Morelli. Joey is a retired law enforcement officer and 911 first responder from New York City. He relocated to Sedona in 2017. He currently serves on the board of directors for Unify Sedona and Northern Arizona Restorative Justice. He is the current program and logistics coordinator for the Crossing Worlds Hopi project. He has also participated in the grant review process for the Arizona Community Foundation, both in Phoenix and Sedona. So please, I believe you are ready to go. I'm just gonna put us in your good hands for the next year. Thank you. For the next year. How about for the next hour?
Yeah, there you go. We could talk for a year though, actually. Thank you, Rosemary. Thanks for having Joey and I here this morning. Just a little one minute elevator speech about PFLAG. PFLAG was established in New York City in 1973. It's been around a long time, over 47 years. And it was created by the mother of a gay son who wanted to help other parents who had children that perhaps were gay, lesbian, transgender, to understand and support their children, because this was in 73, so there wasn't a lot of that around. And so at that first PFLAG meeting, there were 20 parents that attended in 1973 in New York City. And since that time, PFLAG has grown to over 200,000 members and supporters around the country. There's now over 400 local chapters around the United States, and PFLAG Sedona Verde Valley is one of those chapters. And we were established in July of 2011. So we're going to be coming up on our 10-year anniversary next year.
Yeah.
And we meet the second Tuesday of every month from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. We were meeting at the Sedona Public Library until March when the pandemic shut things down. And so now we meet on Zoom from 6:30 to 8:30, second Tuesday of the month. If you'd like to come to our meetings, they're free. You don't need to be a member to attend. They're strictly confidential. For now, you would need to email us at pflagsedona@gmail.com. So PFLAG Sedona@gmail.com. Let us know you'd like to be on our mailing list, and then you would be notified confidentially. You'd be blind copied on all this stuff of our meetings, and then you can participate. The first hour of our meeting is typically with a speaker and a program. And then the second hour, we have a support group where it's just an open topic. Anybody can come and share. And if they need support, we have a professional social worker who is our facilitator, and she does a very good job. One more thing. Also, you can get us on Facebook at PFLAG Sedona Verde Valley. You can get us on our website at pflagsedona.org. And then one other thing is that we have a scholarship program, and we've granted 10 scholarships in the last 3 years. We'll have our fourth year in 2021. And we grant them to LGBTQ students and also allies of the LGBTQ community. We've granted those to students at Red Rock High School, Mingus High School, Northern Arizona University, Yavapai College. So we're really excited about our scholarship program. But that's my 1 minute and 20-second elevator speech. One other thing too that's very interesting is this is my second time presenting to the Sedona Women Organization. Now, the first time though was about 17 or 18 years ago, and I believe it was around Valentine's Day. There was a panel at the Sedona Creative Life Center. There was a panel of men, about 3 or 4 or 5 of us, to talk about our relationships and our marriages and how those were special. It was at Valentine's Day. And of course, I didn't look like this at that panel session 18 years ago. So it's interesting how life kind of sends you on different routes. It sure sent me on a different route. So today I'm going to discuss some transgender information, related definitions. I'm going to talk about pronouns, and I'm also going to tell my story. Everyone is unique, so I can only talk about myself, and I do not claim to represent the transgender community. I do not live full-time as a woman. I live about a 50-50 life. It's a little complicated. I'll get into that later, but that's what works for me, and that's who I am. I live half of my life as a man, John, and half of my life as a woman, Jennifer, and hence my nickname, JJ. I don't like labels. There's many terms out there that attempt to define a person like me. We're all unique, but some of these terms are non-binary, and I'll get into these in a minute. Bigender, gender fluid, to name a few. Native Americans call people like me two-spirited people. You may have heard that. But the difficulty is that not all terms adequately, define the uniqueness of each person. And each one of us, we don't all fit neatly into a gender box. Most of us do, but some of us live along that spectrum. Because I am one example that gender is not black and white or binary. Gender exists along a spectrum or continuum to a great extent. I live somewhere along that gender continuum, as a non-binary, bigender, two-spirited person. I know that's a mouthful, isn't it? I have trouble keeping track of it. Many people think sexual orientation and gender identity are one and the same thing, but they're not. They're different. They're distinct and separate. Sexual orientation is who you are attracted to romantically and physically. And gender identity is how you see yourself. So they're separate. You can also look at it this way. Sexual orientation is who you go to bed with, and gender identity is who you go to bed as. And that's a that's kind of a fun way to remember that. I heard that somewhere and I love that one, so I wanted to use it. And then when you think about the LGBT acronym, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, the L, G, and the B are really sexual orientation, and the T is gender identity. So that's another way to try to remember that it is separate. The L, the G, and the B are all about sexual orientation. The T is gender identity. So now I'm going to go over some definitions for you, and I hope this isn't too boring, so I'll try to get through those first. First, I want to define transgender. It's a broad umbrella term for people whose gender identity, gender expression, or behavior is different from those typically associated with their sex that's assigned at birth, either wholly or partially. You know, there's a lot of transgender women, you may have met them and not even know, because they are living a full-time life as a woman or a man, full-time life as a woman or a man. For me, it's partially. I do this about 50-50. That works for me. I've thought about going all the way. I've pursued it. I came to the conclusion I would not be happy giving up either side of me. I'm a whole person when I get to express both sides. Cisgender is a word to describe people who are not transgender. Cisgender people's biological sex matches their gender. And I would suspect most of you today that I'm talking to are likely cisgender, most if not all, probably. I'm just guessing. Non-binary can be used also as an umbrella term. So transgender is an umbrella term. Under that, non-binary can be an umbrella term, which encompasses many different gender identities that just don't fit into that male or female binary. So it's non-binary. You know, like the two I just mentioned, gender fluid and bigender. At its core, non-binary is used to describe someone whose gender identity isn't exclusively male or female. And under non-binary, you've got gender fluid. That's where a person's gender identity and internal sense of gender changes over time. An individual is considered gender fluid if he or she cannot identify with either male or female. So they can't identify with either. They flow back and forth. A gender fluid person has a shifting identity. An individual is considered bigender if he or she has two gender identities, male and female. That is, gender, depending on the circumstances, a person may behave and feel like a gender male or a gender female. And so a gender fluid person has a shifting identity. A bigender person has both a distinct male and female personality. Identity, excuse me. For me, my two personas, John and Jennifer, are very separate and distinct from one another. So if I had to label myself, I am closer to being a bigender person than really a gender fluid person, because my John side is, you know, it's John, you know, it's Jennifer. When I'm over, hopefully, you know, this is Jennifer, not John, but, you know, but they're very distinct and separate. And I have felt different since I was a child, probably since about age 7 or 8, with thoughts in my head that I wanted to be a girl or dress as a girl. But I knew I was a boy, you know, and I knew it was not socially acceptable, especially in my Catholic family in the late 1960s when I first started having these thoughts, you know, and desires. So, you know, that was my secret. I was a popular boy in school, and I was athletic, and I played basketball, baseball, and football. And I know looking at me now, this might surprise you, but I was the quarterback on the football team. And it's kind of ironic that I used to be a quarterback, and now I want to date a quarterback. And I also, you know, I used to date a cheerleader, and now I want to be a cheerleader. It's just the irony of life, you know. And it's funny, about 5 years ago, I was an Arizona Cardinals cheerleader for Halloween, and I went up to Jerome, and I had the best time. It was so much fun. My dream came true. I remember about being 13 and 14. It was in the early 70s, and growing up in Chicago. And, you know, at that time, you know, we had like 5 TV stations, but I was going through the dials, and I came across this talk show, and there was this just gorgeous woman on this talk show. And she was transsexual, is what the term was back then. Her name was Rachel Harlow. And I was just fascinated because I had had these thoughts in my head for years. And, you know, I had two thoughts in my head when I was watching that show. And one was, I thought she was gorgeous and I wanted her as my girlfriend. And the other one was, I wanted to be her. So that thinking has never left me. My gender issues were my deep, dark secret since I was a child. And I had lots of shame, lots of guilt, lots of fear associated with it. The fear was mainly fear of being discovered. You know, I felt isolated. My family had no knowledge of what I was going through, what I was thinking. I had no support. They didn't know, you know, that other side of me. And I didn't share my thoughts and desires with my family or anyone into my child, you know, as a child and into my early adulthood. That was my big secret. According to a PFLAG publication, family support and acceptance is the single strongest predictor of mental and physical health and well-being of transgender and gender nonconforming young people. So having that family support is just key. Love and support at home, you know, from parents and your family. Transgender youth face bullying in school, stress, anxiety, emotional isolation, and depression. Excuse me. They are more prone to homelessness, substance and alcohol abuse, and attempting suicide. It's a big problem. Within the past few years, we have gotten more trans youth and transgender young adults, their parents, their grandparents attend our PFLAG meetings, just seeking support, seeking education on that topic. And that's what we do as a resource to the community. We help these parents and these families and the gay or trans person themselves as well, obviously. But we have just seen an uptick in transgender related activity at our meetings. So I hid my female self for most of my, you know, from people for most of my childhood and into adulthood because I was just afraid to show the world who I truly was. I mean, I was terrified to let people know this. You know, it was not socially acceptable. And I was afraid of being negatively judged, being discriminated against. I was afraid I would lose the love of my friends and family, you know, if they really knew this side of me. And, you know, none of that happened. I'm out to everybody. And I think I've lost a couple of friends, but you know what? They were jerks anyway, really. So no great loss. But I tried to conform to society's expectations. You know, be a man, date women, get married, have children, be a good husband and father. And I did all of those things. And I became really good at compartmentalizing my life. You know, but at the same time, I was miserable as I tried to suppress my feelings and wanting to live as a woman, you know, at least part of the time for me. And my suppression of my female side and who I really was took its toll on my marriages. And yes, plural marriages. In April of 1999, I can't believe it's almost going to be 21 years ago coming up here. As my third marriage was falling apart, I decided I needed to get some gender therapy. I needed some therapy to talk about this. And so this was April of 99. I went to, for several years, to a wonderful Sedona therapist. And I'm going to say his name because he helped me more than anybody in my whole life. And it's Rich Schoenberg. I don't know if many of you know about Rich, but he helped me more than anyone helped me ever. Accept, embrace, and celebrate this side of me and love all of me for the first time in my life. And I joke that I went and saw Rich so much, I probably paid for a new wing on his house. You know, I mean, I was in there all the time, but it paid off, you know, and I'm glad I did it. So I then embarked on my journey of self-discovery and coming out and living authentically. And it was quite a journey and a process. And you know what? It still is. This is a part of it, you know, doing this. It's a lifelong process. Excuse me. When I came out to my family, their reaction was a mixed bag. My parents are both deceased, and so they never knew this side of me. You know, they never knew this side of me. I have 5 siblings. I'm the youngest. 3 of my siblings are very conservative Catholic, practicing Catholics, and 2 of them are not. And so I decided I came out to my non-Catholic siblings because I didn't think I'd ever come out to my other 3. I really didn't. I came out to those 2 in 2002 and 2003. So it's quite a while ago, and they're very supportive. And I have to say, they kept their mouth shut. They didn't tell the other three. I came out to my daughter in 2003, and she is very supportive of me too. And we are extremely close. I've got 2 little grandkids now, and I just love them. And you know, we're very close I'm very close with my daughter. But it's kind of funny that she used to give me these boring ties, you know, on Father's Day. And now I get these sexy high heels on Mother's Day. It's just amazing. No, that's just a joke. That's just a joke. But actually, she gave me, I've gotten 2 pairs of high heels from her on Christmas. I mean, it's awesome. Gotta love a daughter like that, huh? If you're me. Anyway, a PFLAG meeting in December of 2013, so almost 7 years ago is all it's been, inspired me to come out to my 3 Catholic siblings. And I was petrified. I never thought I would do this. And so they're scattered all over the country. So what I did was I put together about a 3-page email, and I sent it to them at the same time. And I copied my 2 other siblings who had known about me for years, and my daughter, and talked about that in my email. And I remember I was shaking when I hit that send button, and I just waited. And so the response was kind of a mixed bag, but one brother said, you know, you're a child of God. I love you. And that was awesome. You know, another brother who was very, very, very conservative, he said he thought I either had a birth defect or I had a developmental misstep occurred somewhere in my youth. So I got that range, you know, but I know they still love me. We still communicate, you know, they don't accept me or support me, but they love me. We're a very close family. We have 6 kids. We're all very different, but obviously I'm pretty different, but we have, the other ones are too, but we have a very close relationship, but they don't accept me, and they don't, you know, they don't want to talk about it. I've offered, you know, anytime you guys want to talk about it, they avoid it like the plague, you know, can't go there with me. And I think they, you know, I think they think I'm going to hell probably. And they, you know, they think it's, you know, maybe this is a phase. If we don't bring it up, you know, maybe it's just a phase. And I'm thinking, well, I turned 60 earlier this year, so I don't think it's a phase. I don't think this is going to go away miraculously. Living life in both genders has its set of challenges, as you can imagine, you know, and a big one is closet space. I mean, come on, you know, I mean, poor John, he's got about 10% of all the closet space in my house, you know, and Jennifer, you know, I love high heel. I love heels. So I've got a kind of an Imelda Marcos complex, I think. I've got, you know, anyway, that's a different story. That'll be a different presentation. You know, and also, you know, living 2 lives in a 7-day week can get a little hectic. It really can. It's pretty, you know, keeping track of everything. But seriously, you know, working through my fears to live authentically, contrary to society's norms, has been a huge challenge for me. And to some extent, it still is. You know, I mean, oh, you know, I think, oh my God, what would all my friends and family think? What do they think now that I'm out? You know, what about my reputation after living in Sedona for 35 years and having a very public life in Sedona, working for the city of Sedona? What would they think? So all those fears of letting people know who I really am. But the following 3 powerful statements have helped me conquer my fears of coming out and living my life in both genders. And maybe these will resonate with you too, as you work, you know, through any fears and adversity you might have, because we all have fears. The first one is from Rich Schoenberg, my former therapist, and he's also a musician. He's an incredible musician. And these are from lyrics from one of his songs. He said, "Heaven is inside us all, but you've got to face the fear to feel that heaven inside you. You've got to face your fear." And I just love that. The second one is, I'm not sure the origin of this one, but I've heard it for years and I just love it. What other people think of me is none of my business. And you've heard that one. Yeah, that is, I love that one. And I would literally in the early days of coming out locally, I'd be all dressed up in my living room and I would say that out loud about 3 times before I'd walk out the door, and it would get me out there, you know? And then the third one is from, this is my favorite, this one. Ancient Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu. Care about what other people think and you will always be their prisoner. And that is, to me, is so powerful and so true. You know, it's just like, be who you are, you know, and don't worry about what other people think. And I know it's easier said than done, but I just love that one. Another tricky issue of living my life part-time as a woman is using public restrooms. We have all heard about the public restroom controversy, you know. And frankly, I've not had a lot of problems with that. You know, when I'm presenting like this, I use the women's restroom because after all, I just want to pee. That's all I want to do is I got to go to the bathroom. I have to go to the bathroom. And I'm not going to go into the men's room like this. That makes no sense. I could get physically, that could be, you know, abused. That could be problems. So I go in the women's restroom. Never really had much of a problem except at one business. And this has a happy ending. So I'm going to tell you this little story. It was at Cliff Castle Casino. And this is about 6 years ago. I went in there because I go there occasionally. About 6 years ago, I'm in there, come out of the women's restroom. I get approached by a security guard. And I kind of knew where this was going. I knew it. And she goes, can I see your ID? And I felt a little, not mad, but a little like, I guess frisky. And I said to her, well, I look 21, don't I? And she said, are you a male? And I said, well, I'm transgender. And she said, okay, if you need to use our bathroom in the future, you need to come find me and we will close a restroom down for you. And then that's how you have to use the restroom at our casino. And I went, okay, you know, I was not happy at all. And so I was with my friends. And so about an hour and a half later, I had to go to the bathroom. So I tracked her down. That night was kiddie night in the bowling alley at the casino. And so they walked me through the bowling alley. I felt humiliated. And they put up one of those big barriers in front of the door, you know, in front of the restroom. And I, you know, used the restroom and then came out of there. And so for a good while, I quit going to the casino because it wasn't friendly. But there were times when I did go and I would either have to hold it and not use the restroom because I wasn't going to use the men's, or I snuck into the women's, hope I didn't get busted again, and got out of there quickly. Well, fast forward about 3 years to 2017, and I'm in the casino early 2017 with my friend Heather Newman, who's a full-time transgender woman, friend of mine, lives in Flagstaff. We were in there, had to go to the bathroom. So we went into the women's room. I came out of there, no problem. She was about 5 minutes behind me and I'm saying, what's going on, you know? And so she comes out and she said, you're not going to believe this. They ID'd me and the security guards. And so she handed them her driver's license, which says Heather Newman F, you know, on it, female, because she's changed her name legally and everything. And so they looked at it and just said, okay. And so I was president of PFLAG at the time then too. And I decided to give them a call the next morning, Cliff Castle. And I called them up and I explained the situation to them. And this has a happy ending. Explained the situation to them. And they were so gracious. They said, we are so sorry. That's not who we are as a corporation. And they said, our security guards are trained to see anything that looks out of place. They investigate it. And so we talked and I thought, you know what? They just need to be educated. That's all it is. They just need to be educated. So I said, hey, I'm with PFLAG. We could do a little seminar for you guys if you want. And so they took me up on it. And it was me, Heather Newman, my friend, and Jen Emmerich, who is a gender therapist in the village of Oak Creek, who I've seen professionally. She was on our PFLAG board at the time. So the three of us, we did two-hour training sessions to 60 supervisory, management, and security staff at Cliff Castle Casino and educated them. And they were awesome to work with. And so I posted that on my Facebook page. I just said, hey, you know, Cliff Castle's terrific. It's friendly. And every time I've gone in there since, you know, not since haven't been there for a while because of the pandemic, but they always treat me great. No problems using the restrooms anymore. So that was a happy ending, that one. The use, I'm getting close to the end here. The use of appropriate pronouns is very important to transgender and non-binary people. And when I am presenting as Jennifer, like I am today, I prefer she and her. When I'm in guy mode, I prefer he and him. Some non-binary people that go back and forth, they prefer they and them to reflect their duality. You know, I'm not a real big they and them person. I like, you know, she and her when I'm like this, and, you know, but some people prefer the they and them. And my recommendation is if you're unsure how to address a transgender person or a non-binary person you may meet or run into, just ask them how they want to be addressed, and they will let you know how they would like to be addressed. And if you mess up, you know, don't kill yourself over it. I mean, it happens. You know, I misgender myself sometimes. You know, I do. I mean, I do. I misgender people. You know, just do the best you can. But it is important to be aware of that when you're, you know, like if I'm presenting, you know, like this, you know, I hope people don't call me a he. You know, it's just, especially if I'm out in public. And that's happened to me a few times. And one time it happened in the Sedona Safeway store. I was checking out, went through the thing, and I had left my newspaper back on the counter as I was walking away, because I bought a newspaper and I was walking away. And the checker, she said loudly as I'm walking away, "Oh, sir," you know, and I'm presenting clearly like this. Now, my voice isn't the greatest. I know, you know, she read me immediately, it gave me away. And I didn't react, I kept walking. And then she said, "Oh, ma'am." And I went back and got it, you know, yeah. And, but, you know, not only can using that wrong terminology and pronouns be embarrassing to the trans person, it can also be very dangerous. If there's someone that overhears that or witnesses that is an anti-LGBT person and wants to make an issue of it, you know, they could have followed me out to the parking lot and who knows what could have happened. Now, that didn't happen. I feel very, very safe in Sedona. I do. I feel very safe. I've never had a problem, but you never know. So it's not only an embarrassing situation, but it could be, you know, could cause, you know, violence. It could be, you know, physical harm to the person. So just to conclude, before I turn it over to Joey, is, you know, as our country has become more divided and polarized, the level of hate crimes on LGBTQ people has increased, you know, over the last several years. And this is especially true for the transgender community. As of today, there have been 33 transgender people who have been murdered in the United States. And this is the highest number that have been murdered since this kind of data started being collected in 2013. And we've still got over 2 months to go. And we're already at the highest. The vast majority of those murdered are African-American transgender women, with Hispanic, Latina transgender women reaching high levels as well. And in my opinion, it is the intersectionality of three things going on here: the intersectionality of transphobia, racism, and misogyny that's the root cause of this violence against transgender women of color. And so I just wanted to bring that to your attention, but I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk to your group, and hopefully you got something out of the presentation and enjoyed a little of the humor too. So thank you. I'll turn it over to Joey.
Good morning. My pronouns are he, his, and him. I am a transgender male. I want to thank you for inviting me here to speak to everybody, even though we are not in each other's physical presence, we're still in each other's presence. And this, I commend the Sedona women for inviting us to speak, considering the global pandemic and that the country is so polarized. It takes a lot of courage for us to speak. And so, and it's been a journey for both of us. So I really appreciate that we're able to connect. And I hope that you're able to connect even over Zoom to our humanity, because that's the most important part. Is even no matter what we think politically or what we feel, it's that human connection that's important to get to know who we really are. And thank you for doing this for us. You know, you're really doing a great service, as Jennifer was saying, that the transgender community has the highest 33 this year deaths through the global pandemic, which is just astonishing for me. You know, it just is blows my mind. So a little bit about myself. I am a retired law enforcement officer from New York City, 9/11 first responder. I came to Sedona in 2017 with a health challenge from 9/11. I pretty much came here to save my life. And as you can see, 3 years later, I'm still here. But it has been an interesting journey for me because I was pretty much considered myself two-spirited before I came here, although I was starting the transition process for myself to become fully a he. I had to stop because of my health issues. And so I came here, and it was an interesting time for me because in New York, nobody really paid attention. Everybody accepted who I was. And now I show up here in Sedona, which I visited for the past 10 years, you know, since 1995. I am a advanced Reiki practitioner and a shamanic drummer, and I had been trained here in Sedona. So I was certainly familiar with Sedona, but there was living here was totally different. And what I recognized was the inclusion and welcoming was not what I expected, not only from the community, but even from the LGBT community. I actually, it took me a little while to get out, and I did do that in 2018. I went to what we call Pride Month in June for the LGBT community. And I met somebody there, and it was an interesting reaction to me because they were standing behind the Pride, celebrating Pride Month, and they sort of went, yeah, go over there and talk to somebody else. And so I thought, well, that's interesting. And so after getting to know who I was, this person and I sat down. And they admitted, a gay man from New York City admitted that he did not understand gender nonconforming people. And so I was vulnerable enough to have the conversation with him and tell my life story. And the one thing that I told him is I had to learn to love the body that I'm in, but honor the man that I am inside. And with that statement, he was able to really understand the journey that I was on. And we have become very good friends. He's like my brother. But he also asked me to participate. At the time, the Arizona Community Foundation and Unify Sedona was embarking on a transgender summit, all-day transgender summit here in Sedona, Mary Fisher Theater. And so he asked me to participate. And we went down to Phoenix month after month. And in May of 2019, I wind up emceeing the all-day transgender summit here at Mary Fisher Theater, which was two people from Tucson, from Phoenix, from all over the state. And it was a diversity. We had a major diversity here, Black, brown, immigrants, undocumented. It was such an amazing situation, and it really got me to learn what's happening here in Sedona. And what was interesting, about 24 hours, well, it started a week before. There was some people that were not happy that we were doing this transgender summit here in Sedona. And about 24 hours prior to the day, we had to put in a security a plan because we got threatened here in Sedona. And so I really say that only to say that it's not as inclusive and welcoming as we think. And that sort of takes me back because thousands of people come to Sedona to find their authentic self. And that's all we're asking to be, our authentic selves. But somehow gender nonconforming people, we're not allowed to do that. There's something about us, it's something about that gender identity issue that offends people. And I'm here to say that we're all, there's a lot of us non-conforming people here in Sedona. So what was interesting was that throughout the Transgender Summit, we got to learn what was really happening and talking about health and wellness. And at the end of that summit, I really recognized that one of my passions is to create a system here of welcome and inclusion in our healthcare system. And so we decided to do a health and wellness summit in 2020 in September. And of course we had to cancel. But in that process of learning about who's inclusive and who's not, because what I recognize is that we have people here making their own homemade hormones and are embarrassed to go to the doctor and, you know, trying to find a doctor. I did send somebody to a doctor as they were trying to transition to get medical advice. And the person says, I've been practicing 20 years here in Sedona, and I've never had anybody ask me to do this. And I will help you, but don't tell anybody. And that's not the type of healthcare I want to have our community, LGBT community, involved with. I like to try to get a inclusive, welcoming practitioners with medical, dental, non-traditional. I did all my treatment here in Sedona non-traditionally. And so it has to go across the board. So I've had this passion of not only talking about starting this healthcare, but also educating people about gender nonconforming. And me, I get called ma'am a lot here. And some days I go, okay, what am I doing here? You know, why am I here? And then a group like Sedona women reach out and say, would you come and speak to us? Then I go, okay, there's a reason why I'm here. As much how it is challenging, it's a, you know, we have to have courage, we have to have intestinal fortitude, we have to have stamina, we have to really be secure in ourselves. And and therapy, you know, we definitely need therapy, you know. And so I want you to understand it. We don't just wake up one day and go, okay, this is me. This is a process. You know, it takes some people 8, 9, 10 years to transition. It's a process that is sometimes makes you want to just sit at home and be quiet, you know. And so I say that, and as I continue here in Sedona, I had a very funny situation at the polls when it was the primaries. I went in and dropped off my ballot, and there was a gentleman there, and I was going around. The gentleman kept calling me ma'am. So I finally pulled him aside, and I said to him, you know, I just want you to understand, I'm not a ma'am, I'm a sir. I'm a gender, you know, from the gender nonconforming community. I'm transgender. And he looked at me and he paused. Well, what does that mean? And so we started talking, and he said, can I talk to you outside? First I went, okay. Uh-oh. And then I went, sure. And we went outside and we had this amazing conversation. And I was willing to put myself in that because I know the reason why I'm here is to be a bridge builder and an educator. And so he talked to me about being in the military for 30 years, and his best friend in the military decided to transition, and he didn't know what to do with it. And so he asked me all the questions he would wanted to ask his friend. And the one thing that I found so funny is he said to me, you know what I find really neat is that both of you are going to get to live both as male and female in the same lifetime. He said, that's like, I think about that and I say, well, he got to live as a male first and then a female. Now you got to live as a female first and now a male. That's pretty cool. And I thought, well, this went a lot better than I thought. But that's why I'm willing to put myself out there, because you never know when those moments are going to come. And more as we talk about it, I wind up doing collaborations. Unify Sedona, I'm on the board of Unify Sedona. We wind up starting collaboration with PFLAG, with Sedona International Film Festival, and we started showing LGBT films at Mary Fisher. Last year, we did our first Transgender Day of Remembrance, and that is honoring the transgender that have been killed for violence. And this year, we're doing the same thing on November 20th. We will be showing a film at the Mary Fisher Theater, and we are partnering with PFLAG, Unify Sedona, Sedona International Film Festival, and Northern Arizona Restorative Justice. And we're showing the film called Major. And it's about a transgender woman who was incarcerated, and since she's been out of incarceration, she has been an activist for the past 50 years. She was part of Stonewall riots. And so it's a perfect film to talk about, as Jennifer was saying, the intersectionality of being trans, of being of Black, a person of color, being in poverty, being homeless, being undocumented, and I think that that's what I'm trying to bring here to Sedona, is that inclusion, that welcoming of everybody. It doesn't matter who you are. And so as we're starting this, as we partner and we keep getting ourselves out there, we also during COVID, Unify Sedona was able to apply for a grant for COVID relief for the LGBTQ community from the Arizona Community Foundation. And we were able to help out some people in our community with that grant during COVID. But I also got phone calls about health issues during COVID. The United Nations talked about how the LGBT and the communities of color were discriminated during COVID about getting help. And so I got a couple calls about some of our LGBT friends in crisis during COVID, and how are we going to deal with that when their clinics aren't open and there's no free services. And so I was fortunate enough to make a connection through Jennifer with a great doctor named Dr. Gonzalez in Cottonwood. And in that time I made those connections. Unify Sedona also got an opportunity to write an invitation to write a grant for the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation to start what I've been wanting to do here is a equitable healthcare system for marginalized groups here in Sedona and in the Verde Valley. And so we did send in a letter of intention, and I will continue, even if we do not get an invitation to write a proposal. What has happened out of that is we made connections with Dr. Gonzalez. We made connections with the Yavapai Apache Nation. And when you start talking to the Sedona women, when you start collaborating and building alliances, you start creating a fabulous community for everyone to live in. So that's the other reason why I thank you for having us here today. So, and that's been the biggest part that I've really been trying to promote is coming together. And telling my story is more about, I present as a man all the time, that this is me. And, when I go back to New York, and I miss New York, not being able to go there for COVID, I miss New York. but I did go back last November. That was the last time I was back. And I spoke at a mega church. I preached at a mega church. First time I invited some of my family members there. And what I didn't recognize is my cousin was videoing it. And she then shared it with one of my other cousins to him, and he put it on Facebook. Well, it went across Facebook to my mother, to my brother, to my sibling, my cousins, and not that most of them didn't know, but my mother is Catholic too, in her 80s, and she really had a hard time. My brother was thrilled. My sister and I don't speak, and that is just in the last year. And so that's why I talk about that. My mother will not call me Joey. And so in a lot of our community, when that happens, people disengage. And I have chosen not to do that. I've honored her in who she is, and she is trying to figure me out, even though I talk about it openly. But it's a process. And I think learning here, in what I tell people here in Sedona is, I get called ma'am, I get called she, and there's people that do it over and over again because they're trying to figure it out. I'm okay. I correct you. I'm okay with that, as long as it's not out of disrespect. If you're doing it out of disrespect, it's totally different. Because you have to understand, even some of the LGBT people do not get us. I spoke at that mega church, and I had a lesbian come down and say, wow, that was way too raw for me. and I thought that was interesting. So this is what I do here. I figured I have to be part of the solution. And so I am willing to talk. But what I really understood here is having those connections, building alliances is powerful here. Mm-hmm. And that's the way I have chosen to deal with my transitioning and my being who I am here in Sedona. And so that is, my journey, and I will continue the journey. I hope that some of you will join us on Transgender Day of Remembrance in November 20th at the Mary Fisher Theater, really to get an understanding of what our community goes through. All the women that have been killed this year are women of color. There have been 3 transgender men this year, which is unusual. And so I really, just to even put that date on your calendar, November 20th, to just think about that someone's getting killed because of who they are, because they want to live an authentic life, is so important as we try to move forward as a community in such a time that we're in. I don't talk about politics. I talk about human spirit. And that's the important part here. We all need to go to a place of understanding and loving each other and appreciating each other in this space that we live in. So I thank you for having us here today. And I hope that someday I get to meet you all in person, because I only get to see Rosemary, and I hope, and Bev, and so I hope someday I get to meet all of you in person. So thank you.
Joey, that was awesome.
All right. Well,
that was great.
Thank you both very much. I'm going to go to some, if you guys are ready, I'll go to some questions. Do you need a break? You okay?
Let's go for it.
All right. You can see the Q&A box. And first of all, I just wanted to draw your attention to a comment from Judith Lewison. I don't have a question. I just want to say JJ and Joey are 2 excellent speakers. Thank you to them both for sharing their stories.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much.
I couldn't agree more.
Thank you.
And I think what you said, Joey, right at the end there, is that in this time in particular, the alliances that we can make are so important.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's how we are holding ourselves together, you know,
Right.
just by those little threads.
Right.
I'm all in favor of that. Um, wow, let's see. I had a couple of questions here from people. And I think you both pretty much answered that already. At what stage of life were you aware the gender assigned you at birth was incorrect for you? I think you've answered that. Unless there was anything each of you wanted to say on that further?
You mean just the age that we?
Well, what stage of life were you?
Yeah,
when you
yeah. For me, it was about like I said, 7 or 8.
Yeah, yeah. And then what circumstances specifically enabled you to come out? What do you think was happening in your life at that time where you finally went, okay, I can do this, I can make a start?
Well, I think for me, it was, I decided in 2012 that I wanted to finally make that transition, start the transition of the body. You know, I already had the mindset and the spirit. The body had to come next. And, but then I got sick. And so, you know, I started just saying I was too spirited, but then I got involved in a church in New York City that was totally inclusive of LGBT folks. And it was such a diverse church too, that they were so welcoming and so talked about it, and that I just felt free to be who I am. And that's when I changed my name. I went and changed my name. And then you know, when I retired in 2014 because of my health, I said, well, now I can do what I need to do. And I think that was the point. You know, I left, you know, in and out of New York City, but New York has always been in my heart because that's where I feel the most inclusive and welcomed.
Can't take the New York out of the guy.
No.
You know, and for me, it was, you know, I've just always had this inner drive to be this. And that's been with me my whole life. And so as I aged, you know, I was living in fear, this self-imposed prison of fear of anyone finding out about me. But my life was becoming unmanageable. And when all of a sudden my third marriage is falling apart, I'm going, you know, I got to figure this out once and for all. That's when I finally went into therapy, and slowly, you know, with my therapist's help, you know, slowly started coming out to people and being real, you know, and being all of me. Because hiding, it's very isolating, you know, having this secret, having to cover your tracks all the time, you know, and I had to be me. And so, and then, so that was a slow process. And then when I retired from the city of Sedona, and I didn't retire to come out, but coming out was a nice little byproduct of my retirement, because my position at the city was very public, very political. And I did not, you know, a couple people knew about me at the city, but not many. And I just did not have it in me to come out, you know, all the way until I was retired. And so that enabled me to just go, here I am. So
Yeah.
gave me a little more courage to do that.
Yeah. Thank you. There's a question here from Linda Scott. I'll just read it. Today, the Pope came out in support of civil unions for same-sex couples. You might have heard that on the news.
Saw that.
They're the children of God and have a right to a family. And she wonders if this will impact our Supremes. So I don't know if you had any comments on that.
Huh.
I know it.
That you never know. That could influence the Supremes, maybe. That's possible. That is possible.
We can hope.
Yeah, we can hope. I thought that was amazing when he came out and he said that. My two of my three Catholic siblings do not like Pope Francis because they think he's too liberal. You know, they want to. So I'm sure they weren't happy with his comments today. But
you know, it's interesting because it's been so unpredictable, the legislation. We got some rulings that we didn't think we were going to get. Some of the conservatives actually, you know,
Right,
sided
right.
with the LGBT community recently.
on employment discrimination.
On employment discrimination, which people were very shocked about.
Right.
You know, and I really, that's where I say, I'm hoping that people start recognize everybody wants to be seen and heard and loved for who they are. And I think people are starting to recognize that includes, you know, employment, being affordable housing, you know, not being discriminated, you know, and so I really started seeing that shift. And so I'm happy to see that because yesterday I was a little discouraged because Texas passed a ruling yesterday. Social workers no longer have to deal with LGBTQ folks or disabled folks. They can turn them away. And I just thought, you know, how do you do that? Disabled folks too. You know, I don't know how they do. They don't have to offer services to the LGBTQIA community or disabled. And I'm not really quite sure how that works. So, you know, that's the thing. We're in such unpredictable times, and it's the people's voice. Whether people realize that or not, it is the people's voice that changes things. And so that's why, even if you're not one of us, stand with us and be part of us. You know?
Well, and yeah, I mean, we want the same thing that everybody else wants.
Right.
You know, we want love. We want to be successful financially. We want to have close family, you know, and LGBTQ people are in every segment of life. You know, there are bankers, there are the people that work at the grocery stores, the former city employees, you know, I mean, it's what makes up a community and a society. We have more similarities with everybody than dissimilarities.
Yeah.
You know.
Do you think there are more transgender people today than say pre-2000, even if they haven't acted on it? Is our society creating more and more LGBTQ? What can I do as an ally that would be most helpful in welcoming these people that I don't think I've met yet?
You know, I'll try to start with that. I think there's more people coming out. They've always been there. But I think, you know, especially in the last 10 years, people are feeling that society is becoming more open to transgender people, for instance, or gay people, mainly trans in the last 10 years. So they're feeling more comfortable to come out. So that's why it feels like there's more people, more trans people than there used to be, but that's not really the case. It's just that they were hiding, you know, and so now they're feeling more comfortable. As far as becoming an ally, you know, we've got several PFLAG publications that I can provide anybody. I can provide those to you, Rosemary, for your library if you want at Sedona Women. And you know, it talks about how to be an ally, you know, and it basically just comes from love and caring is really what it's all about. And educating yourself about the, you know, LGBTQ people, basically education. Joey, did you?
Well, and I think the younger generation has certainly put us in a different space. Because even, I would say even 5 years ago, you were not considered transgender unless you went to gender affirming surgery and were on hormones. Well, the young folks are like, no, this is who I am.
Right.
And I give them that credit. They're not looking to go on the hormones. So they're coming out. And so they consider themselves gender queer or gender fluid or non-binary. And so 1 in 10 is a great organization for the youth that are in that process, and they're teaching the older generation,
Yes.
which is fabulous. And we had them come to the Transgender Summit, and the heads of 1 and 10, and we had a couple of the kids, and it was amazing to hear their points of view. And it's all about, this, accept me as I am, and don't say to me, I don't know. And most LGBT folks can tell you since they were young that this is the way they feel. And so to be an ally is to also to affirm someone, let them go through their process and affirm them, especially kids, because my grandson wasn't sure what was happening for him. He wound up coming out on this past October on National Coming Out Day as gay. But I wasn't sure. He wasn't sure if he wanted to be a girl or wanted to be a boy. And you just have to affirm, their people's, this is who they are, just, okay, that's it, and the younger generation is so much better at it than I play tennis here in Sedona, and I had one of my tennis players tell me I will never get the they part of gender. And she came to me last week and said, my grandkids sat me down and said, Grandma, when you're out of the house, you have to ask people their pronouns, and you have to get over the they thing. I know you're an English teacher, but get over the they thing, because there are theys in the world. And I thought that was great.
That is great.
Yeah.
You mentioned 1 and 10, and JJ, you had mentioned the email address of PFLAG in Sedona. I wonder if afterwards, maybe you'd email me a short list of resources for
Absolutely.
people that have an interest, and we can put that up on our website with the link to this recording, and so on. That would be helpful for those members that wish to learn more.
Absolutely, I will.
Unify Sedona is the LGBTQ Rainbow Alliance here in Sedona, and I'm on the board of that organization, as well as Northern Arizona Restorative Justice. So yeah,
we can both send emails to you, Rosemary. Absolutely.
That'd be great. Okay, Cindy Moscone says, thank you for sharing your stories. Peggy Harris says, thank you to both JJ and Joey for their presentations. Appreciate your openness and helping us in our understanding of your differences. Mary Thomason asks, which religious institutions in Sedona do you feel are most welcoming to trans people?
I can speak.
Experience of that? Okay.
I do. I can speak to that a little bit. The Sedona Unitarian Universalist Fellowship is, that's where I attend when I do attend church, and I've been their speaker. Joey and I were their speakers last year, and I've spoken to them twice. But they're a welcoming congregation. The national UU has designated them that way because of their outreach to us in the community, and they are such loving, welcoming people. They welcome everybody. So when I go to their service, they just welcome me with open arms, and I'm a part of the group. Church of the Red Rocks is also an open and affirming church. They went through a process. They used to provide PFLAG free meeting space for years for our meetings. That's kind of how PFLAG started. One of our founder was a part of that open and affirming process that the Church of the Red Rocks went through. And those are the only two that I really have direct experience with. I don't know if Joey has anything to add.
So that's an interesting question, because at the Transgender Summit, although the faith community was invited, they did not come. And so and I heard the voices there that said, where are they? And so I went on a journey, and besides the Unitarian Universalist church here in Sedona, which is welcoming, I did go around and I invited the faith community to the Transgender Day of Remembrance last November. And Pastor Cindy of the Church of the Red Rocks came. I had Arvell, Reverend Arvell from the the Center of Universal Light in Cottonwood come. And of course, Reverend Glenn came, because that is really important. Because here in Sedona, someone may not go to a therapist, but they'll go to a church. They have, the church is free. And so it's important that the faith communities understand the LGBTQ community. So I have had many conversations with them about it and invite them to almost everything we have
Nice.
to
Good.
build that relationship.
Yeah. Carlin Coleman says, I am so glad to hear your stories. Thank you for your courage to bring understanding and enlightenment to so many. I welcome you to Sedona with all my heart.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Linda Scott says, are you doing any work with teenagers and
We'll have to say something.
Yeah, that's your.
When she comes back. Kind of missed that part. It froze up on us there, Rosemary. If you could say that question again.
I sure can. Linda Scott asks, are you doing any work with teenagers and their families?
I'll speak for PFLAG. Absolutely. We've reached out to the Gay Straight Alliance, it's called, at Mingus High School. We presented to them. That's what our scholarship program is all about as well, is reaching out to the students. We had a Red Rock High School student on our board a few years ago. It was a transgender student. So we definitely reach out. We also get them they come to our meetings as well. These kids that just our last meeting, we had a mother and her non-binary child who was in high school from Prescott. They heard about our meetings and they came for the support segment of that meeting. And so absolutely, we want to try to get the youth more and more involved. It's a little bit like pulling teeth sometime to get the youth involved. But we definitely reach out to them, yes.
Okay. And Sedona Women is going to answer a question live. Or they said they were. Maybe not. Maybe that will come up again later. Okay. Patricia Priore. I attended the films at NDF presented by PFLAG and Unity as an ally. I enjoyed the films and the Q&A after. I'm relatively new to the area and thought it was a good way to meet people.
Awesome.
Very
Thanks
good.
for coming to the movies. We did about 4 last year, I think, didn't we, Joey?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank
I hope
you.
get good attendance this year. I know some people are a little concerned still about being indoors and
Yes.
the mask thing.
Yep.
But I hope you get a good attendance.
Yeah, they can only sell 33 tickets or 33 tickets is all they can sell at Mary Fisher right now.
Wow. Okay. Peggy Harris asks, what does PFLAG stand for?
PFLAG originally stood for Parents and Families of Lesbians and Gays, PFLAG. And now that acronym just pretty much stands on its own. PFLAG National, our national organization, because we've expanded, bisexual, transgender, questioning people, intersex people. So the list, those initials go on and on. I always joke LGBTQ AIA EIEIO. That's just a bad joke, but that's what PFLAG stands for, is Parents, Families of Lesbians and Gays.
Got it. Thank you.
Uh,
I guess maybe this question keeps coming up because they feel it has not been adequately answered. I did ask you the first part. The second part is probably not the right thing to ask. Hey, are you trans? So how do you open a conversation in a respectful way?
Boy, I'll take that one.
Well, it's all depends on, of course, I had this situation happen with one of my friends said to me, I'm not sure what this person is. It seems like they're a man, but they dress as a woman. So I said, just say to them, I'd like to know, what are your pronouns? I want to be respectful to you. And I keep calling you so and so. You know, how would you like me to address you? How, you know, and I think some of the questions people can, and I think to ask, so if you know somebody really, really closely, you can ask, can we have a open dialogue? You know, I'm curious. I would like to ask some questions because sometimes we forget as people who are gender nonconforming that there's people in our lives that are trying to really understand us. And so we forget, and we also appreciate when someone's trying to understand us. So to me, it's an open and honest conversation, and ask them, what's your pronouns? You know, and then say, or can we have an open dialogue about what's happening in your life? You know, and just be, I think that sometimes we have to have hard conversations that are uncomfortable for both parties.
Right.
Yeah.
But that out of those uncomfortable conversations come sometimes fabulous things. You know, and so it's the courage to have those conversations.
Yeah. Well, when I said to a friend, hey, you might want to tune in tomorrow, this is what we're doing, webinar on gender identity. And they said, well, why would I need that? I don't know anybody, and I said, well, you might at least be interested in the pronouns or something. And they said, I think I would start with, so hi, are you taking this bus to the Cottonwood? And I thought, well, yeah,
Yes.
chances are your conversation opener is going to be the same as it
Right,
with
Exactly.
anybody.
exactly,
And it's probably not until a little downstream from that
right,
Right.
where you would get into that other more specific
exactly,
conversation.
right.
Exactly.
Judy Neiman says, I understand that many teenagers commit suicide due to their confusion on their gender. And she follows up by saying, do you think more information should be available to teens than what is available in today's world?
Yeah, I think, as much information as possible, but again, I think a lot of the suicide comes from, these teens, most of them, as we are when we're growing up, everybody, you had a sense of your gender, whether you're a cisgender person or trans, you knew that early on. And these trans kids, they know who they are early on. So I think it's less the confusion, and it's more the lack of support that they get, especially from family, parents,
Right,
school, the bullying that leads to suicide attempts, or actual suicides.
right.
And I think that one statistic is 41% of transgender people have attempted suicide at one point in their life.
Yes,
And I think the general population is like 5% maybe,
Right.
or something like that.
right,
It's just incredible. And that is because it's a lack of acceptance and support, primarily at home,
Yeah.
For
And
the
you
kids.
already talked about the fear and that overwhelming fear that you have to live with all the time.
Right.
I mean, and when I think back to puberty, and I think most of us can identify, that was crazy enough. Anyway,
Yeah, exactly.
tearing your hair out, just behaving in a way you never thought you would, that you're ashamed of later, but you're trying to find your way. So how much
Exactly.
more if you're not really certain who you want to be inside, who you are inside?
Sure.
Yeah. Mary Thomason says, thank you so much for answering the question about how to begin the conversation. So that was obviously an important one.
Cool. Good.
Somebody else who's anonymous asks, what is the derivation of cis, as in cisgender, which means being comfortable as we were born? What is cis? CIS. I did wonder that myself.
I don't really like I don't like the term personally. But that's just the terminology in the trans community, I guess, more than in the non-trans community to just define the difference.
So,
But
yeah, most cisgender means you were born a female and
your gender
your
identity.
gender identity is a
female.
female. You're born a man. So so many people, say cisgender, heterosexual, so that especially now when people are starting to use more and more pronouns, and where you're coming from, that has been cisgender means you were born a girl and are proud to be a woman.
And your gender,
and you're born a boy and you're proud to be a boy.
Your gender's your gender identity's in alliance with your birth sex, your biological sex.
Right.
That's all cis is, and maybe it's just a fancy name. I think it's a word that we never really needed to use way back when this topic wasn't so prevalent, I think. So it's kind of new, actually.
Right.
I don't know if that helps. I hope so.
I think part of I'm sure it did, but I think the other part of that question is, what specifically does CIS mean? I mean, where does it come from?
Oh, okay.
Cisgender. Why not some other term?
I'm gonna look that up and email it to you. When I get home, I'm gonna do that along with the list of resources that you asked. I'm gonna look that up because I'm sorry, I don't have that answer either.
As you were talking, JJ, Joey, it also occurred to me that perhaps it's becoming increasingly important to remove the word sexual, like heterosexual.
Right.
Maybe cisgender is a better term.
Right.
Well, not really, because
because
heterosexual is about sexual orientation. Cisgender is about gender identity. Those are different.
Yeah.
So to use both, but in different ways.
Yeah. It's life's getting more complicated, isn't it?
In many ways.
It is.
Carlin Coleman, I'm so ignorant of the terminologies. What does binary mean? They might have missed the early part of your talk, JJ.
Okay, yeah. Binary is just, you got two options. Binary, male, female. Binary, like, zeros and ones was the binary, system that we've used with computers. But that's what binary is. And so non-binary is a person like me that lives in both, back and forth. I don't live one way. I don't live male. I don't live female. I live both. So I'm non-binary. And again, these are all new terms that I'd say that non-binary term is something that came about probably less than 10 years ago.
Oh, Marie Helt has said cis means on the same side as.
Thank you, Marie.
Thanks, Marie.
Cindy Moscone has elaborated. She says the term cis and trans come from organic chemistry.
Oh.
Prefixes cis and trans are from Latin. This side of and the other side of, respectively. So cis means this side of, trans means the other side of, respectively. In the context of chemistry, cis indicates that the functional groups are on the same side of the carbon chain, while trans conveys that functional groups are on opposing sides of the carbon chain.
Well, thanks,
Thank you.
Thank you, Marie. I love you, Marie. Thank you for bailing us out.
I just have one question here. What changes would you like to see in Sedona in the future? Just what's kind of top of your list? What changes would you like to see? And you can answer that however you choose.
I would love to see an inclusive Black, Indigenous, people of color, LGBTQ, any group that's marginalized, have an inclusion and welcoming here in Sedona. And living here, I recognize that that's not the case. And maybe because I'm so active in different areas, I really think we need to work on that. I really need to think we need to work on diversity here, and recognize that everybody just loves to be here in Sedona. It's a beautiful place and has a, it's okay that we interweave ourselves and become a diverse community. And I really think we can do it. I really think we can. We have so many visitors that come here, but of diversity, but we don't have a lot of diversity that lives here. And I would love to see that. I would love to really see that.
From my perspective, I've been here a long time, and I see Sedona as a microcosm of openness, actually, in the Verde Valley, especially the Verde Valley. Sedona is this live and let live town for the most part, from my experience. Again, it's just my experience of it. But, as society continues to evolve, I would love the change to be when I tell people who I am or that I might meet and we have a conversation, it's just no big deal. And it's kind of like, okay, thanks for sharing. What's for lunch? That's what I think we're getting there as a society.
Yeah.
I do think we're getting there.
Good. Good. Okay. Looks like those are our questions for today. Yep. So I just want to thank you both again so much for being here today. I think you've opened our eyes, maybe widened that lens a little bit for us. And as I said to you yesterday, I hope that this is the first in perhaps many presentations that you can make to our group as we all grow and learn how to live with each other.
Absolutely. And thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for having us today, Rosemary. We really appreciate you giving us this opportunity to speak to you guys, the
Absolutely.
Sedona Women's
Welcome.
Organization. Thank
You're
you.
welcome. And ladies, members, thank you so much for attending today. We really appreciate it. And I will see you at our next meeting.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.